Really excited for our conversation today on the Limitless Leadership Lounge with Dr. Carrie Kisker, and we'll get to her in just a moment. First, though, I'm John Gehring. Dr. Numa Kareem is here, and Coach Jim Johnson as well. This is going to be a fun conversation today. As we always do, tri-generational conversations for you, the emerging leader, gaining leadership and personal development insights for you, whether you're starting a business, you're a leader in one, or even just as a leader in your family or your community. Coach, go ahead and introduce our guest today. We're excited to dive in.
Yeah, so we had a chance to connect with Dr. Carrie Kisker, and I had a nice conversation with her. We're really excited to have her on our podcast. So let me just share a little bio. Dr. Carrie Kisker is the president of Kisker Education Consulting in Los Angeles and the director of the Center for the Study of Community Colleges. Drawing from her own and others' research, she regularly speaks, writes, and consults with college leaders on issues related to entrepreneurship and innovation, program and policy development, strategic planning and accountability, civic learning, and democratic engagement. Dr. Kisker holds a BA in psychology and in education from Dartmouth College and an MA and PhD in higher education from the University of California at Los Angeles called UCLA. Being a basketball coach, there was this guy named John Wood that did a pretty good job there. Dr. Kisker is also the author of The American Community College, written with Arthur Cohen and Florence Barr, The Shaping of American Higher Education, with Arthur Cohen, and Creating Entrepreneurial Community Colleges, a Design Thinking Approach. Without further ado, Dr. Carrie Kisker, welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Well, thanks so much, Coach. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, so I'm going to delve in because we've definitely have had other people with PhDs and worked in higher education, but I know you focused a lot in the community college, which is something we haven't delved into much. So I'm going to ask a question: is that when students finish high school, a lot of them have no clue what they want to do,
Mhm.
and I'm interested is what would you tell a student that didn't have any really idea as far as why community college might be a great option for them?
Sure. Well, there's all sorts of reasons why community colleges might be a great fit for a student. But let's say particularly someone who's coming from high school, they don't know exactly what they want to do. They're a little nervous about spending somewhere between 25 and $80,000 a year to explore that. Now, if you can do that, that's fantastic. There's nothing wrong with going directly to a four-year residential university and learning about yourself. That is the heart of the liberal arts model, right? That has worked so well for 400 years in this country. And there are a lot of students who either can't afford that, who can't move away from home, who are maybe taking care of their parents or other family members or have their own children, or need to work for whatever reason. And so that journey of self-exploration needs to be a little bit less expensive and a little bit closer to home. So community colleges provide one way to sort of figure out what we're interested in as a student, and where our strengths lie, right? We know that in this country, a whole lot of students come out of our secondary system, the K through 12 system, not feeling very good about themselves as students and not having a lot of confidence in their abilities. And that is, sadly, both a truth and a failure of our system. But community colleges really provide a lovely second chance for those students to perhaps study something that might be a more applied and therefore of interest to them. So maybe one of the skilled trades, where they may be able to graduate in a year, 2 years, sometimes even less, with training that prepares them to go right into the workforce and potentially earn a six-figure salary off the bat. They
Mhm.
also provide students who maybe do want to pursue university studies the chance to figure out, maybe knock out a couple of those general education requirements, figure out where their passions lie, and then transfer to either a nearby or sometimes a faraway university. That happens all the time. So, the beauty of community colleges is that they have for roughly 100 years sort of had this a la carte model of offering something for everyone. It can also be the downfall of many a community college, right? Because we're trying to be all things to all people. But there's a real heart in that idea that no matter what you want, you can achieve it here. And so most community colleges are really trying to maintain some aspect of that. You can find yourself here, you can find your passion, you can find your path without, necessarily having that scattershot approach to doing everything all at once as well.
Mm. And Carrie, I watched your video on the leadership in existential crisis, and we are living in a kind of dystopian world right now. And those who are in the academics, we are experiencing uh, so many challenges. So you as a leader, and you have been consulting leaders in the field of education. I know that civic learning and democratic engagement is so important for the students and for all of us. But recently, we are seeing that those things are discouraged. And sometime, being an academic, our values are also we are experiencing conflict. That conflict of how to do what, when, we are being challenged. So how do you, like, as a leader, how do you navigate this contentious territory of teaching our students on how to think in that right way, standing for what is right? So how do you do that? Or just we step
Yeah,
aside?
that is that is Dr. Green. That is the question. We are living through an unprecedented challenge to higher education. The only real parallel that might be appropriate would be uh, back in the 1940s in the McCarthy era and blacklisted professors and attempts to stifle free speech and academic freedom. But I would argue that our government, both at a federal level and within many states, have gone much, much further than that today to stifle academic freedom, which is the long cherished right and tradition for professors to be able to speak and teach about what they believe is important. When they do so, they are speaking for themselves as individuals, not for the institution. Those are two separate things, which is why academic freedom is not always extended to administrators of these institutions, right? Because they often are speaking for their institution. But faculty really have the right, and it's protected largely through tenure, to academic freedom and freedom of expression. And that is being torn down. And it frankly has been attacked for years, but those attacks have been under the radar. And in some cases, we have allowed protections like tenure, and by we, I mean those of us in academia, have allowed protections like tenure to go by the wayside on our own watch. So we are not faultless here either. But to answer your question, I think we're in a time of unprecedented attacks, not only on what universities and colleges are doing today with regard to DEI and inclusion practices or what's being taught in the classroom, but really what is being attacked are the fundamental pillars upon which our entire system rests. And without these foundational pillars, I argue, we don't have the best system of higher education in the world anymore, right?
Mm.
So I give a lot of talks about this. Maybe you've seen a clip online. But to me, those fundamental pillars are number one, and perhaps the one that everything else rests on is institutional autonomy. And this has been established and upheld in the courts for centuries now. And it essentially is the right of institutions to make decisions to govern themselves in the way that they see fit. And this is for
Right.
public institutions as well as privates, even though publics do have to comply more with state regulations and so forth. And the reason this is important is that it protects against government intrusion in saying what you can teach and how students must learn, right? So
Mm.
it protects against exactly what we are seeing being attempted today.
Mm.
The second pillar is, I mentioned, academic freedom, protected largely by tenure. The third pillar is freedom of expression, which I separate out from academic freedom because freedom of expression should be protected and encouraged for students as well as for faculty, right? So whether you're attending a community college or you're going to an Ivy League institution, our goal as educators is to help you, I think you mentioned this, Dr. Cream, help you think and learn how to think and how
Mm-hmm.
to consider a problem or a challenge from multiple perspectives. It's part of why
Mm-hmm.
we ask students to take a course in the quantitative sciences and in life sciences and in humanities, is because all of these different disciplines have a different approach to how they would consider a problem and seek to solve it. And so the thinking goes by exposing students to all these different ways of approaching and solving problems, we are teaching them how to think. Um, I have very rarely, if not never, seen or experienced a classroom where the teacher tells a student what to think. I think that's
Right.
a real common misperception in our higher education landscape right now. There's a lot of people, especially on the conservative right, who see universities and even community colleges as these places of liberal indoctrination where they're going to send their students um, and and the students are going to come out believing something completely different than what they were taught maybe in the home or how they were
Mm-hmm.
raised. Now, we do know that there is a period of cognitive and intellectual growth during the high school and college years where young people start thinking for themselves really for the first
Mm-hmm.
time. But coach, I'll ask you this. How many of the young people have you coached or taught who have been easily brainwashed and just accepted whatever you told them is truth without pushing back or questioning it? I think anyone who's taught young people know, I see you nodding, that they're very unwilling. I have two teenagers right now, very unwilling to accept what I say as gospel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then just to go, we can come back to that thought because that's a biggie right now.
Yeah.
Right.
But then we also have stuff like protecting access and supporting all students through our colleges and our systems. And that was not always, I mean, we were not founded as an egalitarian system of higher education, but we have worked hard to become one. And in
Mm-hmm.
part, I believe that's why our institutions are being attacked right now because they threaten the preservation of a, I would say, racialized class order that some people may be trying to protect. And then the fifth and final pillar is a real commitment to working for the public good. And I would be interested in all of your thoughts on this as
Mm-hmm.
educators as well. But our system of higher education was really founded, and community colleges are perhaps the clearest example of this, founded to give back to the community, to teach students how to think for themselves and become, if not politically engaged citizens, at least civically engaged citizens. People who can recognize a problem in their community and identify ways to solve it that work for them and their families and the people they care about. So, unfortunately, to get back to your question, I think that we are being attacked um, at the foundational level in all of these
Mm-hmm.
areas. And we can talk about why that might be. But I think you started the question by ask, what can leaders do? And I would include faculty leaders in my answer as
Mm-hmm.
well. I gave a talk recently to, let's see, the acronym is NISA, the National Institute for Staff and
Mm-hmm.
Organizational Development. And I answered this question and I said, I think we can fight back. Maybe fight back isn't the right word. That we can work in three different strands. The first is we need to be connecting.
Right.
Harvard is fighting the battle with the federal government on its own, but Harvard is Harvard and it can afford to do that. They
Mm-hmm.
are perhaps the only college in the world who can afford to do that. Everybody else, and certainly our broadly accessible institutions and community colleges, need to work in concert with one another. So I've been really encouraging faculty associations to within disciplines to talk with one another, community colleges within regions to form alliances and to work with one another. We've seen faculty in the Big Ten and the university sector start to do
Mm-hmm.
this. And we're now starting to see the associations across the US step up and help in this way too. The second strand is resistance. And resistance is tricky, right? Because when we hear resistance, we tend to think, well, that means everything we have been doing is absolutely right and they're attacking us and we're going to fight back against everything. And I think um, we are under attack, yes. And at the same time, we're not perfect individuals and we're certainly not perfect institutions, and we don't always get everything right. So
Mm,
even though we may resist the attacks at the foundational values that we hold as institutions and as educators, I think we also have to be really willing to look at mistakes we may have made or how we can do things better.
mhm,
Or are there alternate approaches to accomplishing our very noble objectives that maybe do not raise the ire of some people who feel like that we're going about things the wrong way? And then
right.
the third strand, which, that sort of self-reflection leads to, is innovation. I think we're in a period where if we can recognize that when we're under attack is the biggest opportunity for growth, we can really innovate. We can find new
Mm,
ways to serve students, new ways to serve communities, new ways to protect things like freedom of speech and the students' right to self-expression and activism on our campuses, and recognize that that must be done in a way that does not threaten any constituency on campus or off, or preclude anyone's access to their own learning and development. So I think there's a real chance for innovation here. Unfortunately, a lot of what I do is innovation coaching directly with colleges and universities, which we sort of, you might think of as fireproofing your home, right? Like you're trying to
no,
find ways to protect your home in the future. But unfortunately, fireproofing has to take a back seat when there is an active blaze
Yeah.
raging through your kitchen.
mhm,
So while I'm encouraging leaders to act in these three areas, I think it's understandable that there is a lot of, okay, I understand, Carrie, but we need to focus on the blaze that is happening right now and deal
mm.
with what is really threatening us today and this week.
Yeah. Yeah. Carrie, this
Beautiful said.
this might be more anecdotal, but just this concept right now, and I feel like is really catching on in society. Again, I don't have any statistics to back this up, but just from what I've seen is this whole idea of like, hey, college isn't for everybody. Follow your path. And while I don't disagree with that statement, I also think that we've turned that into college isn't for everybody. Therefore, maybe it's actually for nobody. And I couldn't disagree more with that.
Yeah.
At what point do we have to? Because certainly we have to encourage maybe high school graduates who aren't ready to jump into college at this point. We have to encourage them to follow their path, maybe consider an education, further education down the road, but for now, maybe enter the workforce. Everybody's path is different, right? So I'm not saying college is always the answer right out of high school, but at the same time, it feels like obviously with like federal and state governments, like you mentioned, there's a tax there, but then there's also seems to be, from my perspective, like this overall cultural narrative that seems to be going against colleges and more to working right out of school.
Yeah.
Tell me if that's actually
John, you have
legitimate
hit
or
on,
just
no,
anecdotal.
you've hit on one of my biggest pet peeves, which is that statement you said that we hear all the time, that college is not or should not be for everyone. And that rankles me for two reasons. And the first is that when people say college is not for everyone, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, they're referring to that 4-year residential college experience,
Mm.
right?
Mm,
So they are saying the 4-year residential bachelor's degree attainment route is not for everyone. And that drives me nuts. I work most of the time with community colleges. I write most of the time about community colleges, and community college is college. In fact, I have a t-shirt that I made that literally says community college is college, sort of like on the line of everyone watches women's sports, you know, um, uh, because I get really upset when people do not include community college in that notion of college. It is college. It often
mm,
leads to a bachelor's degree. It leads to other degrees and certificates that prepare you for the workforce. It is college. It is a slightly different way of approaching college than a 4-year residential college experience. But just like Colgate University looks a lot different than UC Santa Barbara,
mm.
Your local community college is going to look a lot different than both of those. And they are all college. They are all college experience. So I hate that college isn't for everyone statement because I think it really ignores the places where 40% of undergraduates in America start their education,
Wow.
right?
Right.
40%. And the second reason I hate that is for to your first point, I think, John, which is that it is a slightly underhanded way, potentially, at least in some people's mouths,
Mm,
of saying college should not be for anyone
right.
or attempting to tear down the public trust in our
Mm,
institutions. So I agree with you 100%. I do not think that every single student coming out of high school needs to go directly to college. If that is not the path for them, no problem. If community college is the path for them, great. If it's not the path for them and they need to get out into the workforce, great. That's another beauty, Coach, to get to back to your earlier question, another beauty of community colleges, and frankly, many more institutions these days as well, is that you can come back for upskilling and retraining. There are not a huge number of students, but there's way more students over the age of 65 coming back,
Mm,
not to study basket weaving and, personal interest courses, but to actual learn new skills and trades in our community
mm,
colleges all across the country right now. So the statement college is not for everyone drives me nuts. But I agree with you also that it doesn't have to be the path directly out of college for everybody. And if you can go get a certificate and become a solar panel installer in a year or 2 years and make $100,000, that is still going to college. Let us
yeah.
not exclude that, or take that really elitist view of what college is.
Mm,
mm.
Great
yeah.
point.
Good
Hey,
point.
Carrie, I got to ask you, because I know you've done work with entrepreneurship and, our podcast focus on trying to help young and emerging leaders. So can you give us two or three pieces of advice for a young person or even a person that's in mid-range in their career and now says, you know what, I don't want to work for someone else. I want to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on giving them some advice of taking the entrepreneurship journey?
Well, I think maybe the three of you will agree with me. I think the skills and mindsets that it takes to be an entrepreneur are going to be increasingly necessary for all of us, whether or not
Hmm.
we want to start a small business,
Yes.
especially in a time of AI and just the pace at which our technological powers are growing. It's going to become more important. Those jobs where you go sit at a desk and work for 8 hours and
Hmm.
punch your, clock are already almost gone, right? And so, Ruma, this goes back to your point about learning how to learn,
Mm,
maybe in college being the most important thing. And I think the entrepreneurial skills and mindsets go right along with that too. That
right.
the pace of change in the labor market is so fast these days that whether you want to start a small business or you just want to be able to survive in whatever industry you are currently working in,
Sure.
you're going to have to be able to think entrepreneurially and in an innovative way. Because that's what we can do that the machines cannot, right? The
Right.
machines are trained on human learning, but they are not thinking beyond human learning yet. So we have to be able to continue learning. And coach, I think you're right. I think if you're wanting to start a small business, you have some measure of control over your own life and your own destiny. And you maybe if are able to pivot faster than if you are a cog in the machine going along and doing what your boss tells you to do every day. I think you're going to be out innovated in that
Mm,
second example. Um, I
yeah.
know that I didn't set out to be a small business owner or an entrepreneur. Neither did my husband. We both worked for other people early in our career, and now we both work for ourselves in our own
Yep.
companies. And in his case, for example, he works in entertainment, and the entertainment industry is
Changing.
just yeah, it is changing really fast. And the only way he could see to maintain some longevity in that business is to design a way to do it differently. And I think
Mm,
that's what we all need to be learning.
Right. And you talked about design thinking approach
Yeah.
as entrepreneurs. And I also took the path. I started working at UNICEF and then 9 to 5 job, and then I moved into academic. So after 10 years, I start to reinvent myself. And then I decided to start my own nonprofit and working on some startup industry, thinking about some startup industry. And I think we Gen Xers are a little bit challenged now because things are moving so fast with the AI and everything. There is no certainty in our career, like
No.
where we are sticking to. And this shift of change, I think, is so important for us to have that mindset of uh, learning to unlearn also.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the adaptability. So how, like from your point of view, when you are counseling the leaders, do you see this area that need to be explored, like the adaptability and flexibility, and how do you get that? How do you teach that to people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there are probably lots of exercises and ways that you could teach
Hmm.
that I typically come in and have one, two, sometimes three, maybe half days with a group of college leaders and faculty and staff. And so I'm very limited in what we can do during that time. So what I often try to do is focus on the front end of the design thinking process, right? Which
Mm,
is really identifying what your stakeholders' needs are and which of those are not being met. And
mm,
I think that leads into so we often go through a lot of exercises to do market research, to talk to students, to talk to faculty, community members. What are the workforce needs in our areas? Go back and really identify what are the needs, where are we meeting those needs, where can we do better, and where are the unmet needs. And
mm,
to me, the unmet needs are the key there because that's where we have to say, okay, we're not doing this or we're not doing this well. What needs to change so that we can serve this need? And sometimes it's we're not the best organization to serve this need, so we're going to collaborate with somebody else
right.
to do that, right? But I think that that's where the adaptability comes from. The hardest thing to do in higher education and potentially most places is um, to realize to sunset programs that are meeting a need that no longer exists as
Mm,
strongly as it once did. And the reason it's so hard is that oftentimes that translates into real consequences for real people, either lost jobs or asking them to pivot, or shutting down a program. And even if there's only one student who wants to take that program, that's one student who now
Yeah.
is not able to do it. So it's really difficult. It's much easier to add, right, in order
mm,
to meet an unmet met need. It is much more difficult for college leaders and probably everybody else to say, okay, we're going to stop trying to meet a need this way because we need to put our resources in another area. But really, that comes down to being responsive and adaptable and listening to your community members and what they're asking of you. And it's
but we have
difficult.
so much resistance. Like I
Yeah.
see so much resistance. Like when AI was introduced, there is a generational difference in adapting to AI. I
Yeah.
am not going to, even I mentioned to many of my friends, like, I'm not going to use AI for writing things. I don't want to jeopardize my skill of creativity. But now I like, okay, let me try this. And then I find out, like, yes, I can keep my voice, my emotion, but AI could also facilitate. It can be a tool for me to go into another level.
I
So,
hear you. I too have pushed back on using AI for writing because I'm a writer. I have books that I have
right.
written, and that's my work product. That is my thought. I sit with every sentence, and
Mm,
like it's creative, but it's also this physical challenge because it doesn't, I really work to wordsmith and have it say exactly what I want it to say.
right.
And then so if AI can do the same thing, I'm wondering, well, what good am I anymore? Right? Like what is the utility for me in my career and what I have to say? But I agree, we have to be adaptable, and there are ways that all of us could use AI. There are
Mhm.
also ways that we can all adapt and either incorporate or change the way we do things to respond to other technologies or students who are coming into our classes who may learn differently than the students of 30 years ago or the athletes of
Right.
30 years ago, right? So we have to be adaptable in all kinds of ways. I think we're AI is the big scary, elephant in the room right now, but there are all kinds of things that should be forcing us to adapt.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they're all scary for
Mhm.
us
Mm.
old Gen
Yeah.
Xers.
Oh, no, and for old 26-year-olds too, because it's terrifying. It's really terrifying. I would argue that, Carrie, to your earlier point, I don't think AI can replace you as a writer. I mean, it can certainly help, to Renuma's point, but I certainly think that your writing is still valuable, and that thought
Mm.
leadership is so important. And that's ultimately really who we are as educators, as thought leaders. And
Yeah.
I'm an adjunct. I teach one class. I can barely count myself in with you guys, but
You're
still,
one
we're
of
all
us, John.
educators. We're all
You're,
educators. And as far as staff, faculty and staff, this is one question that I had for you.
yeah,
As someone who, because maybe it's a personal question for me, I don't know, might consider going down an increased role in education in the
yeah.
future, besides what I currently do, what would you advise? Because I feel like a lot of, again, this is anecdotal. Again, I don't have any evidence for this, but colleges, universities, and high schools and below too, there's a lot of need for educators. The
Right.
role seems to be under attack.
Yeah.
It isn't as lucrative or maybe just attractive of a role as it once used to be, and now everybody's hiring and looking for people.
Yeah.
So first of all, what went wrong? And second of all, should this still be an exciting career for people who want to make a difference in the lives of youth?
I'll take that last question first. Yes, it is. And I think it is the most important career and
Mm.
frankly can be the most rewarding career. And Coach, I'll look to you uh, as perhaps our senior most of the generations represented here. But I imagine you have not stayed in coaching and teaching and working with young people because it's lucrative. I think
Mm.
you've stayed in it because you make connections and you can see the impact you have on young people's lives. And in many cases, and I know this to be true about you, and I assume it to be true about all of us, have made a real change in the trajectory of someone's life based on your interactions. And sometimes that's as little as just seeing them and recognizing that they may be going through something difficult. And hey, I'm here if you ever want to stop in my office or talk about
Mm.
anything. As a faculty member, maybe that's as simple as like, hey, is everything okay going on in your life? If you need an extra week on this paper, let me
Mm.
know. And sometimes there's nobody else in a student's life who takes the time to just stop and say, I see you. It looks hard. How can I help you?
Right.
And it's
Wow.
important that I help you. And then it's important
Mm.
that you continue regardless of whatever's going on. And we'll find a way to help you do that. And I see smiles and nods from all of you right now. I think that's why we get into this.
Mm.
We're not going to retire on a yacht as educators.
Yeah. No way.
Um, but I do
No
think
yacht in
that,
my backyard.
yeah, exactly. But I do think that, when we think about what we would like written on our tombstones at the end of the day, it's
Mhm.
not, I made enough money to retire on a yacht. It's, I changed some people's lives.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would
Amen.
encourage you to continue your work in education, John. It is,
Hmm.
to your first point and question, I think it's perhaps harder than ever. I think teachers in particular and faculty members in colleges have been undervalued and underpaid for years, especially teachers in the K through 12
Yeah.
system.
Mm.
And we can talk all about the reasons why for that, even though that's not really my area of expertise. I, of course, have opinions. Um, but I think that administrators too have been blamed for all kinds of things over the past couple of years. There's this whole concept of administrative bloat in colleges and universities is the reason why tuition has gone up 30% over the past two
Hmm.
decades or whatever it is. And part of that is there is true. There are more administrators, but there are more administrators for two reasons largely. One is to comply with governmental
Mm.
regulations. Um, and the second is because we have recognized that we need to do more as institutions to support the students who show up on our doorsteps every day, and that it is not okay to open our doors, say, come here, teach a class, and send them home. That there's all kinds of work we need to do to support all students who come from all kinds of backgrounds and different experiences. And so there has been growth on the administrative side, especially related to student services. But I have a really hard time accepting that that hasn't been a good investment.
Mm.
Anyone I
Mm,
think
Yeah.
who runs a for-profit business would know that you spend a whole lot more money trying to get a new client through the door than
Yeah.
you do
mhm.
keeping the current client involved through completion. And it's the same in education, and yet we have a hard time spending money to do that, especially at our
Yeah.
public institutions.
That's good.
Yeah, and you had a good point. Like, what does that look like? Because your point earlier was that we need to get higher education institutions more involved in the community.
Yeah.
So what does that often look like? Is it, the fraternities and sororities doing more community service? Because that's something that we see, but is there more than that you're referring to when you say that?
Yeah, so as you know, I work mainly with community colleges, and it is intrinsic to the mission of those institutions to be responsive to their communities. So you see this in all kinds of ways. You see training programs developed specifically for businesses in the area. And oftentimes this is done in concert with metropolitan areas or regions in order to bring company headquarters to that region, right? So, and say, if you can bring State Farm here, we will develop an insurance administrative degree program to educate their workers, right? Or if you bring Boeing here, we will develop an aeronautical engineering program that transfers directly into the BA program at our nearby institution and that provides technicians who can graduate in 6 months or less and go right and work for them. So community colleges have forever, for the past 100 so years that they've been around, worked really closely with chambers of commerce, with local businesses and industries in order to provide some cases direct training and then other cases develop programs where incumbent workers can come upskill and reskill and further their education. So that's one way of working with the community. Other ways are offering English as a second language courses for community members. This is not leading toward a degree or a program, but just providing those resources for skills, maybe holding daycare on campus. Santa Monica College, near where I live in LA, has a gorgeous pool that is open to the public. And there's all kinds of Santa Monica also has an emeritus college where they invite older retired folks to come take a class on, I don't know, World War II history or none of these courses lead toward a degree, but they certainly provide engagement for the community and intellectual stimulation for a population who maybe lacks that to some degree. Sporting events is another way that we all interact with our communities, right? And it's a big source of community pride. I'm speaking specifically about community colleges, but you could draw parallels. I also think that what we don't understand too is how much educating students at all types of institutions and at all levels contributes to local revenue and economic growth. When we took students off college campuses during the first year of COVID, local businesses died. There was literally nobody to go to those stores to buy those sandwiches. And then also we're graduating students and they're staying, in particular international students who come to the US for college, like to stay and contribute to the economy and take jobs that further our own workforce very frequently. And there's a recent report out saying that we are going to lose something like $60 billion as a result of the drop in international student enrollment this fall as a result of that. So the community give and take is enormous and often invisible, in terms of how it keeps certain communities. If you think about some of these college towns in the middle of nowhere, they would not be alive. They would look like old mining towns if the college or a university were not there to keep it afloat.
Yeah, that's a
True.
good point.
So true.
Carrie, we really appreciate, and I have one final question. I'm sure my co-hosts do as well, but I'd like to, because I know you work with a lot of leaders.
Mhm.
And so if you were advising a young person to zero in on a couple ideas on how to be a more effective leader from all the work you've done with leaders, what would be one, two, or three ideas you would share with that person to become a more effective leader?
Oh, that's a good question. The first thing that's popping into my mind is that the best ideas can often come from unexpected places.
Mhm.
So I think we all run into the patterns of thinking that the smart person in the room or the most degreed person in the room or whomever is going to have the best ideas. And sometimes that's the case. But I have seen innovations adopted in community colleges that came from a statement that a custodial worker made saying, I'm noticing that a lot of students are eating lunch and dropping their trash in this area. And what if we maybe beautified it and made this a place for gathering and connection? And all of these things can support student success. And so be open to ideas from wherever they come. I think that's one thing. Don't get
Carrie,
trapped
let
in,
me add just say one thing because you really hit a good thing there because this is one of the hardest things in my leadership journey is that I think I became a much better leader and just to reinforce what you said is I believe the most effective leaders are trying to find the best answer, not necessarily
that's
their
right.
answer. And boy, you said that quite well. So I just wanted to share that. So
Yeah, I like the restatement. I think that's exactly right.
yeah.
The second thing I would say and do say all the time is expect failure and embrace it, and sometimes even celebrate it too.
Mhm.
I think sometimes our I see in my children today are so afraid to fail because they think it brands them as a failure or unable to do the work. And what I try to impress upon them, and I think probably what most educators do, is how else are you going to learn?
Mm. Yeah.
If you don't fail, and ideally you fail sort of in small ways and adjust and make improvements. But sometimes we fail in big ways too, and that is okay. That it does not mean that we are a failure. It means that that idea needs some more work, or we neglected to take something into account, or we needed another round of edits, or maybe we needed to study harder. So I think that that advice I could give to all students, but especially to leaders too, who are trying to incent innovation on their campuses or in their companies, that don't expect people to get it right the first time. In fact, if they got it right the first time, you'd probably be leaving something on the table, right? That there is further innovation that could come out of that idea if you just accept the first iteration of it. Um, and I think the final advice I would give is that, we tend to see entrepreneurship and education as two separate things. And you either go through an education system and get a job and go into a career, or you are an entrepreneur and you do things yourself in your own way. And I think it's a false dichotomy. I think that there are incredible entrepreneurship training programs at nearly all colleges and universities these days. And I think that we can all utilize the skills and mindsets of an entrepreneur, even if we aren't starting a small business, even if we aren't trying to go our own way. And on the flip side, if you do start a business, if you are trying to come up with something and do it your own way, it doesn't mean that education, to go back to your point, John, is not right for you. There may be all kinds of things that you can still learn and give back to our education system and still be an entrepreneur and still do things differently. Education is not indoctrination. It is teaching you how to think and exposing you to the ways of thinking, the tools, the analytical approaches, and so forth that may be useful. So don't separate those two. I think that we can have the best partnerships between entrepreneurs and academics and students if we stop drawing those lines. It's either education or starting my own business. I think that's
Right.
Mm.
best.
And I can be walking evidence of that because I have 6 years of higher education and I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And without at least some of that higher education, I would have had no chance. I mean, forget it. I wouldn't even know what I was doing. And
That's right.
part of that certainly is life experience too, because that's part of the
Mm.
beauty of college, whether you choose the community college path or the traditional 4-year path or a combination of both, right? Like just that life experience and the responsibility that you get. I mean, going from high school to college is such a big jump. I can imagine going from high school straight into entrepreneurship is like
Yeah.
I can't even imagine how monumental of a jump that is. I just would have had no clue. So I
And you need
definitely,
networking. I
yeah,
think the
yeah,
college, universities, they also provide you with the network
that's
because
true.
I would not be able to run my programs in my nonprofit if I did not have my alumni base. So
Yeah.
both the Penn State alumni and the Bangladesh University alumni both help me to raise funds for the programs that I want to run. So I think networking is also so important when we are working as entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Even Penn State can churn out some good alumni. Who knew?
Come on.
Sorry. You
Oh,
know, I'm
we
proud of
are Penn State.
Syracuse.
Yeah,
Very,
I'm a
very proud.
proud Penn Stater.
Well, my 17-year-old daughter is applying to both those institutions this fall, so I
Oh,
will
wow.
let you know where she ends up, and then you can fight about
Oh,
it.
Penn State is like the 5 years I was there for my PhD. It is the most happening place, and I met some amazing faculty and people there who really helped me to grow as person. So that's and the environment, Happy Valley. They call it Happy Valley.
Yeah, but our mascot's cuter, Renuma. Come on. Who's got an orange as a mascot? That's as cute as it gets. But no,
Yeah.
both great institutions, and both hills, both with a lot of hills, right? She'll get her exercise in no matter what
Oh
she chooses.
yes.
Indeed. Yep.
Carrie, where do we learn more about your work and potentially get in touch with you?
Sure. So my website, Kisker Ed Consulting, ed being short for education. You can reach me. There's a contact me button on there, and you can learn all about the different strands of my work and my writing and speaking and so forth, as well as the workshops and consulting I can do directly with colleges. I also am the director of the Center for the Study of Community Colleges, which is a nonprofit organization that promotes uh, both our own national research on community colleges, but we also support others' research on community college leadership, practice, and policy. And that is at centerforcommunitycolleges.org. And I'm also on LinkedIn under Carrie Kisker, Kisker. And I'm happy to hear from anyone at any time.
Wonderful. All those links down in the show notes. And we learned a lot from you today, Carrie, both about higher education, entrepreneurship, and I think no matter if you're an entrepreneur or not, or no matter if you have kids in college or you yourself are thinking about going to college, this was still a very valuable conversation. So, Dr. Carrie Kisker, thank you so much for your time today in the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
My pleasure. And thank you for such wonderful questions, all three of you. Appreciate it.